And we're live in three, two, and welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Planet Mullins podcast. We're doing this around the holidays in December 2024. Mike Prigodich, did I say it right?
You did.
Oh,
Yep.
it's unbelievable. Well, I tell you, it's a challenging name, but it also goes with some really challenging tunes. And you're kind of, I'd have to say, after reading all your amazing credits and stuff, you're kind of one of those guys that your writing really stands out because you do a lot of like wacky stuff and odd time signatures. And, you know, we
Wacky,
talk.
but I try to make it not sound so wacky. I try to make it.
Yeah, man. I mean, some of the people that have really enjoyed your writing are Chick Corea was a fan of yours. George Whitty, who's a big name in the piano land, he loves your stuff. David Goldblatt, who I've known for many years, back to his Diana Ross days, as he always had these like crazy stories about trying to get along with her, which was, I guess, impossible. But David said, "Watch out for this guy." Mike is terribly brave, adventurous, playful, and adept. That's really a cool quote. And then says, "Playing your ass off." That's Gumby Ortiz. Joe Locke is a fan of yours. I mean, nice write-ups at All About Jazz all over the place. So you've done more than one album and been at this a while. Where do you want to start? I mean, we were talking about our early days and bands that we were trying to remember. Oh yeah, who were some of those bands that I used to play in? I was in this band called Wind and Silver.
Wind and Silver. Huh.
Yeah, and you know what? We sucked. You know, it was a terrible band, and we got arrested in Canada when we were trying to play up there. The guitar player's girlfriend had narcolepsy, so he was always getting her to drive us to the gigs, and we thought we were going to die because, you know, narcolepsy, you fall asleep driving. But some of your early influences and things that, you know, helped fuel your creativity.
Sure. Well, I got started by quitting piano lessons in elementary school because I didn't enjoy it at all.
Okay.
My dad was my first piano teacher, or at least attempted to be, and I wasn't very successful at it. And so he let me quit in 5th grade. I hadn't gotten very far.
Was he a professional teacher?
Yeah, he used to teach piano lessons and he played organ, piano, and accordion, mostly like in church settings, but also had like classical training in his background. But
I wonder if you ever heard of my Minneapolis band Wind and Silver.
I don't know.
Probably not. But anyway, go ahead.
But I grew up all over the world. My parents worked overseas for a nonprofit.
Oh, wow.
And, so I grew up in East Africa and Uganda and Kenya. Both my sisters were born in East Africa.
Amazing.
And then we moved to the Philippines, where I was in middle school and first year of high school.
Wow.
In middle school, on the radio in the Philippines, that I first heard jazz that I remember, other than like, I guess in elementary school, I enjoyed the Walt Disney movie Jungle Book. That was exposure to jazz and 101 Dalmatians and stuff like that. But
sure.
In middle school, I heard Dave Grusin and Chuck Mangione on the radio, and I was instantly hooked. I was starting to play trumpet a little bit in the middle school band, and so that was my Chuck Mangione influence there. And then, hearing Dave Grusin's music, you know, that got me interested in trying to learn how to improvise, how to compose. I didn't know what I was doing. Couldn't find anybody over there to teach me anything about jazz. So
you just kind of went into it on your own. I mean, I used to do that with a cassette player. I would go to the public library, ride my bike over there, and get these cassettes, and I would check them out. And then I had to like save up to get that 2 cassette thing where you can make the bootleg copy so that you can, you know, try and slow it down to hear what Bill Evans was doing.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of imitating, trying to learn stuff by ear that I heard on the radio or albums that I would buy. And then I got hooked on Chick Corea in high school and Spyro Gyra and the Brecker Brothers and other stuff like that. David Benoit, a bunch of other Don Grusin, Dave's little brother,
Right. Yeah, I know those guys.
etc. Um, I gotta tell you, when I first heard Chick's music, I didn't get it. It was like beyond my comprehension.
Mm.
And so I didn't like it at first. It took me a while, repeated listening and learning more.
Right.
I finally started understanding it. And even then, like every new album I would get of his, I wouldn't like it on the first listen. It would take me. It's like I like compare it to you're learning you're you don't know another language and you hear somebody speaking a foreign language, it just sounds like noise.
Right.
You immerse yourself in that culture, in that country, around people speaking the language, and you get familiar enough with it and you start learning it that suddenly it makes sense and becomes a beautiful thing. So that's
Right. Well, very
what
good point.
music,
Yeah.
what music was like. I'm mostly self-taught, but it's mostly through, it's just the way as kids we learn how to speak a language.
Uh-huh.
Nobody's teaching us per se. We hear it, we interact with people, and we're trying to understand what they're communicating with us, and eventually we pick it up and make it our own. And so I did the same thing with music.
So what was the very first Chick album, and he speaks very highly of you, by the way, that I heard was Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. And that was like a straight...
I got into Chick's music first through backwards, like through the Electric Band, I think.
Oh,
is
okay.
First exposure to Chick. And,
Romantic Warrior?
It took me a decade or more before I started getting into Return to Forever.
Oh.
So I like started in the Electric Band, acoustic band era and moved forward with all
Okay.
And it was only later that I then deep dove into his earlier stuff, and then became a fan of the early stuff too. But
yeah, I mean, unbelievable. Well, he's one of the few artists out there who was able to, just put out there this like killer electric fusion thing and call it electric, and then put out a killer acoustic thing and call it acoustic. And
yeah.
a lot of the rest of us, I've done the same thing with an acoustic trio and then an electrified quartet, but in my case, I don't have as big a market as Chick, and a lot of times it could confuse people about, they say, well, what do you actually do?
Yeah.
What is your music actually?
Chick was so prolific and so, constantly trying new things, everything from chamber music, more like classical kind of
right
stuff, to avant-garde, free jazz, to bebop, to burning fusion stuff, modern jazz, and then incorporating all sorts of other stuff from all over the world. Like he was a huge fan of flamenco music from Spain.
Right.
Immersed himself in that and just orchestral stuff he's done.
Amazing.
String quartets, lots of duos with different unique instruments, stuff. Bela Fleck with Gary Burton.
Yeah, love the Gary Burton stuff.
Plus piano, and so just he was constantly exploring new things and not concerned about being pigeonholed in any one area.
Well, the obvious question then that my fans of my show and people new to your music, the obvious question is, well, how the heck do you, as a self-taught piano player, all of a sudden you've got Chick Corea giving you quotes and reviews about your music? That's like a huge accomplishment. How did you pull that off?
That's a very good question. I'm still myself.
You used to sit outside him and Gail's house and
Nope, not at all.
Play castanets and go Mike is here, Mike is here.
Actually, in college, I dabbled in some different music groups, but didn't go to school for music. I ended up being a philosophy major. of all things. And I work a day job in the IT industry,
Uh-huh.
the tech world. And never, I played in some cover bands, some wedding bands, things like that. And wasn't really, I would occasionally write something, but not, once in a blue moon. Um,
So how does that
and
relate
and
to you
and
meeting Chick?
how that related to me meeting Chick was I was super busy with my day job and thinking, well, I'll have time for music when I retire.
Uh-huh.
Then I'll work on trying to make my music dreams come true.
Okay.
Well, uh, in 2008, suddenly out of the blue, I got diagnosed with cancer,
Uh-huh.
and that the fear of death scared me into it.
Oh, well,
So
that's a good way. I mean,
I
we don't
thought
need
I thought I,
the details of the cancer, but did you
yeah,
just
but it
it
just lit a fire under me that I was thinking,
great.
what if I don't even make it to retirement? I guess I got
Oh,
to make my
wow.
music dreams happen now. And how do I do
Yeah.
that? So I started just like I took a few months of jazz piano lessons with a great player in town here in Portland, Clay
Uh-huh.
Henderson. And then he encouraged me to start going out to jam sessions and meeting people. I had no clue what the music scene was even like in Portland. Uh,
Uh-huh.
so I started going to clubs and interacting with the local musicians that I would hear playing.
Cool.
Go to when national artists came through town, I would go to those shows and try to figure out ways to meet them,
Right.
talk, and every person I talked to, also networking with people on Facebook, social media, every single musician I would interact with, I would ask them for advice. Uh,
Uh-huh. Good.
and one of the best pieces of advice I got was from I met Mark Egan, Pat Metheny's former
Bass
bass
player.
player,
Yeah.
and he said, "Find, seek out opportunities to play with musicians that are much better than you."
Uh-huh.
So I started doing that. I started going to a jam session that required the rules for that jam session where you had to write originals and bring the
Oh,
session for others
okay.
to read with you, or you had to do jazz standards but in odd meters. But that
Oh,
ruled out a bunch of players, and
right.
the best of the best were at this session, and then that session went under, and so my contacts through that, I started, I kind of had the bug, like, this is fun. I want to keep hearing my tunes being played by other people.
That's super
And
cool.
so I started my own band, mostly out of an informal jam. And then I thought, well, we should start booking some shows. And then
Right.
I really started rotating people out to finding better and better players. I eventually approached my current band members, uh, asking them if they had any high-level students that might want to play my music.
Oh, that's a smart way to do it. Yeah.
They asked for some demos and charts and stuff, and they looked at them and said, "We can't think of any students that could play this stuff, but we'd love to give it a shot."
Oh, nice.
And I couldn't believe it. I thought they were joking at first, but they were dead serious, and they've been mentoring me ever since, giving me great feedback. And then I get scared that they're going to get bored, so that makes me step up my game to
Right.
write something that's going to be interesting for them.
Wow. Great.
I didn't know anything about writing in odd meters other than they didn't make any sense to me. I didn't know how to play them. So I would just pick an odd meter and
Uh-huh.
write something and then have to teach myself how to play it. I'm
Well,
not very
I know how to do that because I come from a drumming background. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4.5, 1, 2, 3, 4.5, 5, 2, 6, 7.5.
Yeah, so I just I'm not very disciplined when it comes to practicing. But if I write something that I think would be cool, uh, then that lights a fire under me as far as motivating me to figure out how to play it, and that improves my playing.
Well,
Um,
you certainly are playing at a very high level. I mean, I've watched some of the videos of your groups from the past couple of years, and it's interesting too because on the writing side of it, I'm with you. I always felt like I was more of a writer than I was a musician, and then I would write this stuff, And at times when I had record company budgets and really great players, my writing went to a really high level.
Mm-hmm.
But I could rarely translate that to just the average level jazz guys that I could get for a gig.
Uh-huh.
So I ended up having like, the the really cool hard stuff that the superstars do. Can I pay 500 for a Ndugu?
Uh-huh.
And then I had the like medium hard stuff, and then I had the easy stuff, which was the more smooth jazz groove thing that
Mm-hmm.
that anybody could do. But it's a challenge to just, and people that aren't writers don't realize, just because you wrote this thing, that doesn't mean you can sit down and play that shit.
Right. Exactly. Oh, and then how did I meet Chick?
Yeah.
So, I started attending his shows and stuff, and I saw that he had his 70th birthday celebration at the Blue Note in New York, and
Ah.
I couldn't make it out to that. But then a few weeks after that, maybe a few months after that, he booked a week at Jazz Alley up in Seattle.
Oh
So
yeah.
I drove up to go see him there, and I had written a tune in honor of his 70th birthday, called Armand
Nice.
Birthday. And so I printed out a copy of the chart and tried to. Uh, I think I somehow met his tour manager,
Okay.
um, and said, I'd love to give this chart to Chick. And so he arranged for me to hand the chart to Chick, and Chick took it
Wow.
and said, "Do you have a recording of this I could listen to?"
Uh,
And I didn't. I didn't even have a demo or anything. And but I had I did have a live recording of my band performing it, sight reading it, in front of a live audience. That's how I would, like, a lot of my new tunes. We didn't have time to rehearse,
uh,
and so I would write a new tune, maybe send a chart a few days in advance with maybe a rough piano demo or something, and
uh,
we would just nail it on the gig. They're amazing readers, the guys in my band. So I sent Chick a mix of that,
oh,
uh, and then one of my Facebook friends saw something in, I don't know, it was a Keyboard Magazine or something, that an ad that Chick was going to have his first ever in-person week-long master workshop on the East
oh,
Coast. And so this friend of mine sent me a blurb about that and said, you should go. And so
nice.
I signed up for that. It was put on by National Guitar Workshop, of all things.
Interesting.
There was absolutely no guitar involved in the workshop at all. It was Chick, John Patitucci, and Antonio Sanchez.
Nice.
And shortly before the workshop was to begin, National Guitar Workshop declared bankruptcy before paying Chick or the venue.
Oh, nice.
They're taking all of our money. And we all thought for sure there were 23 students signed up from around the world. We'd all booked our flights and we're about ready to head out there. And then we thought for sure it was going to be canceled. And then we got an email from Chick saying, "Don't worry, I'm covering everything. Don't worry about the expense." And he hired his own staff, paid the venue
Wow.
pocket. This was at
Incredible.
a really, high class golf club in Lenox, Massachusetts, in the
Okay.
Berkshires. And
Cool story, man. Yeah.
5 days, and his trio, Bernie Kirsch, his longtime engineer, running sound the whole week.
Wow.
And we had opportunities. I thought for sure we would be like, if we would get to play with Chick, I thought we'd be playing his music. And instead, like, play whatever you want, encouraged us to bring our own compositions. And so I made Chick, John, and Antonio sight read one of my challenging tunes.
Oh my God.
And they did two takes. They were nervous, just like I was. And it was pretty funny to hear them apologizing for their mistakes and wanting to try it again, and kind of shedding things between little bits and pieces of the music in between takes. And
Whoa. That must have been an incredible experience. I mean, what Chick said to you after that happened was, he said, "Wonderful, beautiful, really great. Wow, Mike, great writing."
Yeah, he dug it. And
That's pretty
Antonio and John
amazing.
both really enjoyed the composition too. Antonio actually for the second take, he was like, I want to put a drum solo in this. Can we
Well, of
take
course he
one
does.
section and loop it? You
Of
know,
course he does.
and Chick was cute. He was like, is it okay if we invade your arrangement? You
Oh man,
Yeah, and
that's
so we
great.
did another take, and Antonio did his drum solo, and it was like, really cool ideas, and yeah, it was a blast.
Man, that's the kind of opportunity. Obviously, now we don't get that opportunity since Chick passed.
Right.
But I've been the keyboard player for his buddy from Juilliard, Hubert Laws, the flute player.
Uh-huh.
I've been Hubert's keyboard player for like decades, and he has the greatest Chick stories, man, because
Sure,
they
yeah.
grew up together. And I think it was, Chick's dad or a relative of his that was the janitor at Juilliard that would make sure the coast was clear, because if they got caught playing jazz at Juilliard in the basement, they would be expelled,
Uh-huh.
right? So they
Yeah.
had to, so it's like Chick and Hubert and a bass player all like hiding, in the basement of Juilliard, hoping they don't get kicked
Uh-huh.
out. And then, over the years, we'd be like, okay, Hubert, what dates do we have on Well, I've got to go to Japan with Chick, and I'm really nervous. And I'd be like, why are you so nervous? And he says, man, he's so prolific, just like you said.
Mhm.
I'm going to arrive at the Blue Note Tokyo, and I might not get to even leave my room for 3 days because I got to learn all this impossible.
Uh-huh.
But
Yep.
what's crazy about Mike, about Chick's writing is that even though a lot of it was really notey and virtuosic, it all just makes perfect logical sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And great melodies, and
Yeah.
I've learned a lot just by, I imitate a lot of his different tunes,
Okay.
like concepts that he's using, or a similar groove or similar intervals, or I wrote a tune that I want to learn how to write counterpoint, and so I took Senior Mouse, and it's like, well, how do I make something similar? And so just using little bits and pieces of his ideas, and
Mm.
molding them into my own, without plagiarizing, but just using them as launch pads to inspire myself to try something kind of sort of similar, but different,
Well, I
and it's
mean,
taken a
it's,
long time for me to even like my own playing and writing, because I would be constantly comparing myself, like, I wanted to write a piece that was just as good as this piece over here that he wrote, and think, I failed. It didn't quite meet that standard. And
okay.
over time, I've had uh, you know, people say that they like some of my music better than some of the other heroes of mine that inspired me to write them.
Well,
And
that's a real testimonial to your writing talent. I mean, the thing that I noticed about your stuff is that it goes to unexpected places, which I really like.
mhm,
And when I teach seminars and interact with people, it's all race, creed, color, different ages, all that stuff. And I tell them, whatever your story is, I am not surprisable. Like, there isn't anything you can tell me or play for me that I'm going to be surprised at.
okay. Uh-huh.
And I heard some couple of things in your writing that I was like, wow, I would have never thought of that.
Uh-huh.
It was really different. And there's this one thing in that Chick tune, You're Everything.
Uh-huh.
I don't have a keyboard set up here, but I did that with Hubert as part of the Chick Carnegie Hall tribute. So I was in that band.
Mhm.
And we were rehearsing this. It was just me and Hubert and a bass player. And Hubert says, at this one place, man, Chick had this one crazy lick that's in D flat major, and your everything is in A major.
Okay.
That's the key, right? And then on the second chord of the tune, it's the G flat diminished sound over A flat. A flat diminished, but that D flat 7 flat 9 thing with the 5 in the bass is the A flat. And Chick had this lick in D flat major, and it doesn't make any freaking sense except right there for that one little place. And if you ever did it in the wrong spot of the tune, you'd get fired. And every time we came to that spot in the tune, Hubert would look at me like 2 bars in advance for the same thing. I could see it on his face. He's like, "Are you going to remember that Chick lick on D flat? Because that's the key to this whole gig."
A lot of the stuff that Chick did, like at the workshop, we would ask him, like, we would try to deep dive into some music theory questions, and and he would, I don't know if he was kidding or not, but he would at least act like he didn't know what we were talking about. Like he didn't think about music in terms of scales and modes and this kind of sound or that kind of sound. And to him, the scale didn't matter. It was just a series of notes between point A and point B. And anything's game in between.
Well, to your point about his melodies, like his melodies were so strong, and on that that tune, "You're Everything," that was the light as a feather period with Joe Farrell and Flor Purim and Acuna. Who was the bass player on that record? Do you remember? I was going to say Miroslav, but I don't think it was him.
No, I thought it was Stanley.
Oh, Stanley. Yeah, it was Stanley. And but he had these melodies that made all this diatonic sense. Like you could just do a Chick melody and you could put really, just one note as the foundational key and play that on the bottom. And I remember doing that and then trying to find the lick, that went over the whole top of everything. But from the way I understand it and the way Hubert talks about it, Chick always thought of every composition as a journey. You're like starting at point B, like you said, and then you're going to go from this place to this place to this place. And Chick would do that. He would create sometimes, and I don't know why I'm stuck on that tune, "You're Everything," but you go to the bridge. You go to the bridge of that, and it goes like E major, and then C sharp minor, 2 5 1 in C major. That makes no sense.
Right.
But the melody note makes all the sense.
Right, exactly.
And then if you aren't convinced, then he has the whole band go ba-da-da-da-da-da. Chickism on the end, man. Incredible.
One of the other great pieces of advice I got from I think it was my piano teacher I had briefly back in 2008, Clay here in Portland. He encouraged me to think of paint myself into a corner and find my way out of it.
Wow.
And so that's been my approach to improvising, to songwriting, etc. And I think that's kind of Chick's approach too, where like anything goes, and then you create stuff that like that shouldn't work, and now you have to figure out how to fit the pieces together. Right. And so that's been a really fun game to play in all the writing and soloing and everything in my tunes, is just how do you navigate your way through this? And,
well, I noticed that in your stuff, and to the credit, I want to mention one more Chick tune, and then we'll talk about the credit of your band that follows you so well through all your crazy pathways. But that tune, 500 Miles High, I learned that because I was around that same period, like 70s. I was in high school. I was like G minor 6, B flat, then 2 5 1 and A minor, and then F minor, C minor. He's already done 3 keys of music, and what is that, like 10 bars?
Yeah,
it's E minor, right? Then it's A minor, then it ends in C minor, and then he drops in that B13 altered, or flat 13 with the raised 5 at the end, and you start it all over again. And I think Jarrett he would write tunes like that too, where you just very short tune, 10 bars, 14
Mhm.
bars, but the way they would set it up to repeat back to the beginning, you always felt like you were going somewhere new, but you weren't.
Right, right. You're always
Yeah.
like kind of falling forward, and it just sort of, yeah, you're in a loop, but because the harmony is keeps moving in
Yeah.
unexpected ways, it never feels like you're repeating yourself. It feels like you're just constantly, falling forward.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool metaphysical quote. Now, did Chick ever try and get you to sign up for Scientology or not?
Nope.
Okay.
I think in that whole week, uh, he maybe said one sentence that even mentioned Scientology or L. Ron Hubbard.
Okay.
I think in response to somebody asking him a question related to that somehow.
Uh,
But yeah, he did not try to force that on anybody. After the workshop, he mailed out a little booklet just on like ethics. That was,
okay. I
I think,
remember the ethics
or something.
booklet.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but nothing too out there, and just not trying to force any beliefs on anybody. The whole theme of the workshop was think for yourself, and
Uh-huh.
so he was encouraging everybody to don't pay attention to what anybody else thinks. Think for yourself. What do you like? What makes sense to you?
Right.
Don't pay attention to critics. Don't try to do what other people tell you to do.
Right.
Do figure it out, yourself, and figure out what you like and what makes sense to you. Yeah.
Well, I've gotten a lot of those little Chick quotes sent to me by Hubert in the middle of the night after I overplayed on a gig. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and we've flown all the way to India, haven't slept in days, and then I had like 8 bars where he didn't find what I did as, the ultimate choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get these text messages. And by the way, that third note of the melody line in bar 18 on B3 is supposed to be staccato.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be like, no. I mean, but the guys from Juilliard that went on to be jazz guys, like those two cats, they really they're much more precise when they play than I am. I never have
Mm-hmm.
had this precision at the keyboard because
Right.
I grew up as a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
And on a snare drum, you're very precise, and it's a finite pitch, and you're like right on it. But
Huh?
just getting piano technique, which I pretty much am like you. I'm self-taught at that, and then just learning how to do that. Now you manage,
Yes. Well, speaking of piano technique,
yeah.
I played with terrible technique growing up, and when I got to college, my freshman year in college, I actually wrecked my right hand.
Oh,
I snapped the ligaments and tendon stabilizers in my fourth and fifth finger in my right hand,
wow.
uh, hitting the
Oh,
piano too hard, and I felt a lot
oh,
of pop, sharp pain,
oh
and then
no.
I lost control of my fourth and fifth fingers and really couldn't use them for almost a decade. Uh,
Wow.
and so I thought, okay, I'm done being a piano player. Um, and that's why I didn't even bother trying to be a music major in college. I thought, I have to do something non-music related. And it was only through stubbornness and the draw, just I like music. So
Yeah.
I relearned how to play mostly with three fingers in my right hand.
Uh-huh.
Started trying to incorporate my fifth and fourth finger, but I had to like hold them together to have any strength.
Right.
I went to a hand surgeon. They wanted to do like 3 surgeries over a year and a half and said it's only 20% chance it would help and might make it worse.
Wow.
And I thought, yeah, forget that. So I just would live with it. And eventually I started gaining some independence between the two fingers,
Mm.
and eventually started being able to play octaves. And
Okay.
now I don't really notice it. And I've watched some videos and read stuff and had some tips, about technique and not hitting the keys too hard and just using the weight of my arms. And
Right,
so
right.
I've spent a lot of time trying to teach myself the better technique so I don't injure myself. But yeah, technique is something that is really important, but you don't really think about being self-taught
No,
until you injure yourself.
yeah, I agree 100%. And when I was teaching privately pretty much full time, I would have these guys that were Hammond players
Mm.
who had come in, and I had this, I had a couple of different pianos. I had a nice Grand that was I kept at a recording studio and did a lot of work on. And then I had one of those Yamaha MX100A upright disc claviers,
Oh wow. Uh-huh.
and I got a great deal on it because it was like Charlie Sheen's bungalow Malibu piano, and he hadn't been to that bungalow for like 5 years or something, and
Hmm.
they were getting rid of the stuff in there, and it came through on an ad that I saw, and the guy at the piano store said, "You could get a disclavier for $1,000, and
Wow.
it's a Yamaha, and
Uh-huh.
it's an upright, but the floppy disk and everything." I was like,
Uh-huh.
"Man, I'm in, right? Move it
Uh-huh.
over, so bring it over, come on with it." So I got this piano, I put it in my house, and man, within like 3 months, these super heavy-handed B3 players and guys that play piano like it's a sporting event,
Uh-huh.
they destroyed that piano.
Yeah.
I was so bummed. And, they didn't want to play on a keyboard because they had a keyboard at their house and they wanted to play Rob Moen's piano.
Hmm.
But it was thrashed. I mean, eventually, when I moved, I just moved it back to the piano store and said, sell it to somebody. And I think I got like $5,000 for it,
Oh wow.
which was nice. But I came from playing the drums, so
Mhm.
I think the advantage to learning piano after learning drumming is that I play unusual rhythmic patterns because I play drum rudiments on the piano.
Uh-huh.
So my left and my right-handed stuff is different than most guys because of the drumming thing. But yeah,
Well,
it's
Chick was a drummer too, and he
yeah,
carried a lot of that
a lot of
into
the
his
greats,
piano.
lot of the great pianists. Jarrett could play drums really well.
Mm-hmm.
Bass player Brian Bromberg is a ridiculous drummer,
Mm-hmm.
like
And there's a lot of
ridiculous.
drummers out there that are ridiculous piano players. Like even Jack DeJohnette's a great piano player.
Yeah, I heard Jason Ed could play.
Uh-huh.
Well, speaking of players, I want to dive into that for a minute. So you've got these incredible guys supporting your music. Damian Erskine on bass, and he's a nephew of Peter Erskine. And if
Hmm.
you don't know who Peter Erskine is, folks, you need to Google that guy. I've been following him all the way back to the Weather Report days.
Yeah,
And Peter is now he teaches at I think he's still teaching at USC.
I think so. Yeah.
And but that guy, was just talk about being born at the right time around the right cats.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has played with everybody, and I got familiar with him through Weather Report mostly.
Yep. I think Damien actually got like some little mini lessons from Jocko backstage at Weather Report shows when he was a kid. Um,
Right. So Damien, the Erskine's nephew, was like hanging out around
oh yeah.
the Weather
Yep.
Report thing.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
the
And
best way to learn.
Damien's father was actually the bass player for Stan Kenton.
Mm,
So he's got a lot of bass and drums in his genes. In fact, Damien's also a drummer. And in fact, he
okay.
went to when he went to Berkeley, he originally went to Berkeley on drums.
Okay.
He switched to bass halfway through because he got tired of lugging his drums everywhere.
Yeah. I can believe that story because I got tired of lugging drums around too, but he's excellent.
Yeah, he's a
And
player. He's a great guy.
and he also plays with Gino Vanelli, which is great. So I love him.
He
Tell
even
me,
got to record and tour with his uncle Peter in Peter's one of Peter's trios.
that's super cool, man. Now tell me about John Nastos. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So John's a great sax player in town.
Tenor sax in Portland.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, his primary instrument is alto sax, but for whatever reason, we end up having him play tenor on my tunes. Um, I think just because I tend to write stuff that works, with like Michael Brecker's sound in my ear.
Okay.
So Michael was largely on tenor when he wasn't
Right.
piano.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, in most other groups, John plays alto.
Oh,
But in my
okay.
band, he plays tenor, and he occasionally plays tenor with other groups. But yeah, John got to study at Manhattan School of Music, I think with Bob Mincer and
Okay.
uh, Chris Vidala, who was Chuck Mangioni's sax player for a while.
Okay.
And so John and I, both kind of grew up listening to Chuck Mangioni's music, so we have that kind of thing in common. Um, my but John is also a tech guy. So like during the pandemic, he picked up a day job in the software industry, and so just like me, that's what I do for my day gig.
Okay.
But evenings and weekends, he's playing gigs, and he's done touring with Diane Shure and some other groups. He does orchestral arranging for the orchestra.
Uh-huh.
There's this group called Pink Martini, based out of Portland, and my drummer Reinhardt Melz, is Pink Martini's drummer, as well as Gino Vanelli's drummer. So I share a rhythm section with Gino Vanelli and
Peter
share my
Erskine.
Pink Martini. So I'm lucky to be able to play with these guys because they're super busy
Well,
playing,
yeah.
you know, often not even in town. Reinhardt's been
Right.
touring the world this past year with Pink Martini, playing all over, rarely in Portland.
Uh-huh.
And so I've just been like booking shows, with his schedule. Oh, you've got a little window of time when you're actually going to be back home.
Right.
Okay, let's see who else is available. Is the whole band available? Great. Where's a venue? And so then trying to find a venue that lines up with that very little tiny window of time. And
That's a rough one. Yeah, we talked about that the other day. I mean, that's how it was when I was trying to book, Gerald Albright in my band and Wilton Felder from the Crusaders and but Wilton, I knew his schedule better because during that time I was in the Crusaders, so I knew what he was doing.
okay.
So we'd be
Yeah.
getting off the same airplane,
Uh-huh. Okay.
you know. But every once in a while, man, we would get back, and then Wayne Henderson, who was really kind of booking that version of the band when I was in it, he would just get mad and he would just say, "Wilton, you got to come play with me," blah blah blah. And Wilton would bail at the very last minute on huge gigs. I mean, I had an 1,100 seat theater in Orange County, and like 2 days before I said, "Sorry,
Oh, wow.
I'm not going to be there." And those kinds of things, that's where you have to get into the bench.
Yeah.
You get into that. Well, I want to switch over to the topic of fundraising, because it says here in your bio that you were able to raise $10,000 on Kickstarter, and I know the young people that are trying to become you one day and maybe me one day are going to be interested in that story because that is a lot of money. How did you do that?
Um, Called in a lot of favors. Lots of networking with friends and acquaintances and fans that were supportive of what I was trying to do. So I didn't have a professional recording of any of my music, but I'd been slowly releasing like either piano demos online or you know not very well recorded live recordings
Right.
from gigs I'd played.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I wanted to, I had a dream since I was in seventh grade of putting out my own album. And so I, I tried to figure out how to do that. And I realized, quickly that to do it right was going to cost a lot more than the funds I had access to at the time.
Okay.
And recently laid off and had taken a much lower paying job and was eking out a living, and didn't have any extra funds for, a music project.
Right.
And so Kickstarter came along, and I was a little leery because the way Kickstarter works, it's like all or nothing. Like you have to
All
meet the
right.
goal. You have to set a goal in advance with a
Okay.
deadline. You can't change the deadline.
Oh.
You can't change the goal.
Oh,
If you miss your target, if you fall short, then you don't get any of the money.
all the money goes back to the donors, right?
Exactly. It all goes back to the donors. And so
Now, wait a second. I just
nowadays
want,
there's like
wait,
there's like
wait.
GoFundMe, you get
Hmm,
just partial donations, right?
okay.
Whereas but Kickstarter, it's all or nothing. So
Well, that's
that's
what,
extra motivation then to make
yeah.
sure you hit your goal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you got to be really motivated. So you were just hitting up your friends and local people, and
Yep.
then you had a good quote from Chick about,
Yep.
how cool you were.
Yep. Although, well, the quote from Chick came after that.
Oh,
So this was all before. I mean, I had some of my musical heroes that were kind of aware and cheering me on. But yeah, I hadn't. This was before I'd met Chick and before I'd met George Whitty. Uh,
uh-huh.
After the CD was recorded, and uh, I'd I'd asked George for if he'd want to listen to it uh, and write something about it.
Okay.
And so that's how that came about. And yeah, so this was all, well before, I was just playing local gigs and not very many people even aware of what I was doing. So it was a lot of
Okay.
pavement. I printed up some postcards, started handing them out to total strangers, asking them for funds, and, you know, nickel and dimed my way to the $10,000.
That's unbelievable, man. Well, I think it's getting harder and harder to do that now because people, at least most of the people that I know, are really struggling financially.
Right,
And
right.
with all the prices going through the roof, and then the uncertainty with the economy and all the
Mhm.
political unrest and all that, that's quite an accomplishment that you got that done. But you told me the
I
other
I think
day,
I only had 2 months
hmm,
to do it.
oh wow,
So it was a very short time window. So that
what's
was
is that the
stressful.
Stitch in time record?
Yeah,
Do you have a
yeah.
copy of the CD you could hold up?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and I called in tons of favors for this CD. So,
Put it all the way up in the camera so it's nice and big, even closer. A Stitch in Time. There's you,
uh,
John.
like,
Ooh,
you know, all
oh,
the
cool.
album artwork was done by a friend of mine from college who donated his graphic design skills for the project.
Wow, that's great.
Had another friend from college who donated his legal expertise for looking over a music contract. Just lots of different people, giving me discounted rates or donating their time uh,
Uh-huh.
and expertise in a little different areas. So, and even I had Cheryl Crow's former audio engineer gave me a discounted rate for tracking at the studio.
Wow, and you tracked it there in Portland?
Yeah, just across the river up in Vancouver. It was $1 million studio with a 9-foot Steinway D piano and an expert Steinway concert and artist technician uh, who I'd befriended donated her time, and she came out and tuned the piano like 4 times,
Wow.
uh, and that was her contribution to the project. So just lots of lots of people pulling together. So I mean, $10,000 was, you know, when all was said and done, it was more like a $20,000 to $30,000 project.
Yeah,
But with everybody, you know,
helping out.
helping out, it reduced, my expenses. Uh, I still spent way beyond the $10,000 by the time I got in, like publicists and
Oh yeah,
for PR campaigns and things and manufacturing and stuff. But at least the $10,000 covered
the
the
basic stuff.
time, paying the musicians and
Mm.
mixing and mastering and uh, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's to a lot of the people now who kind of are younger than we are, and they've grown up in the YouTube world where there's these amazing production values and
Hmm.
like the dumbest little thing. Like I saw this one thing when TikTok first came out, and the guys that distribute my stuff were saying, "Oh man, TikTok is all the rage, and you're writing these super long songs," and I'm like, 3 minutes is long. Yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
only 30 seconds, you know. Start writing this
Yeah.
30 seconds stuff. Go watch these videos. And I'm watching, and it's like some like 12-year-old kid standing next to a pool. And then all of a sudden, there's 60 cheerleaders behind him in this like choreographed thing. And they throw him in the pool, then they pull him out, and it's a duet with like four girls singing church harmonies. And I'm going, huh?
Yeah.
You know, but the video aspect of the age that you and I are living in now is a super important one because you know that song that came out all those years ago, "Video Killed the Radio Star." It kind of did,
It did.
you know, back in the MTV days, right?
I certainly have a face for radio.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I know. And then there's a follow-up line that the guys say, and then they have a voice for something else, but I can't remember the punchline of that. But okay, so this album is now available, though. What year did you do it?
Oh, that the studio album was back in it was released in 2011. So it's been
Okay.
a minute. What
Yeah,
I've
but it
really
still sounds great. I mean, I
yeah,
listened to it online. It's very
what I
well
really
done.
for was to come up with something that would sound timeless and not dated.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, that was part of the other motivation for doing this project was in the software industry where I work, you know, all the work I do is obsolete and thrown away every 2 or 3 years.
Hmm.
And uh, so I figured if I could write some music that somebody, you know, 10, 20, 30 years from now could listen to and still appreciate, assuming that technology still exists to play it.
Right, right.
That's a whole other story. But yeah, I just thought, yeah, this is a little bit more permanent, you know, to be able to
Well,
leave a
that's
legacy.
well. I think you know.
World,
I'll
it's like everything
yeah.
disappears so quickly that it's like you never even existed.
Well, I'll highly recommend that album. I really like that tune "Chaos Theory," which I think is the first tune
Hmm.
on there. And then they can go to your website, which we'll put in the description, so people can buy it from you. And then,
And
um,
I've got 3 live albums also that are on Spotify
wow,
and iTunes
okay,
uh, and Bandcamp. You can do digital downloads or stream them.
okay.
And then I'm working on a new live album from some recent shows as well, and some matching video to go along with that. So
Well, I
I
really
don't
am
have a
a.
title or anything for the new album yet, but it's coming.
I know what you could call it. You could call it "Wind and Silver."
That sounds vaguely
It's
familiar.
vaguely familiar. Well, I'm a really big fan of the live recording thing because now in this age with all the computer fixing and auto tune and all this other stuff, I'm happy to say I think I've probably done out of my 42 albums now, like 12 of them are live records.
Hmm.
And same kind of thing, sometimes sight reading.
Yep.
And we had an album that a friend of mine knew a guy that knew a guy. They had this label called Audio Quest, and they were trying to do live to 2-track records at Ocean Way Studios with Alan Sides
Uh-huh.
in Hollywood, which is like the top audiophile place next to Capitol in the whole West Coast. And my friend talked to the budgeting guy because he lived down the street from him in San Clemente, and all
Hmm.
of a sudden they're like, "Okay, Rob, you can bring a band in for a Saturday and a Sunday, and it's
Hmm.
all live. You know, see who you could get, and it's going to be in 2 weeks." I was like, "Oh, well, thanks for all the lead time."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I got Wilton on sax, I got Ndugu on drums, and there was this young, great bass player named Larry Campbell who had just moved to LA from
Okay.
Chicago. And I wanted to do some straight ahead with upright in there and some burning like electric fusion and everything. And I got the room booked and everything set up. And, you know, then Wilton told me, he said, "Well, by the way, I'm preaching at the Jehovah's Witness Church on Sunday.
Okay.
So I can't come there at 9 o'clock in
Oh,
the morning."
wow. Oh, wow.
So I ended up only having a day and a half
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
because the studio is not, and I
Yeah.
think that room was like, I don't know, 15,000 a day,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. But they were making this audio file recording thing, and I said, "Well, whenever you can get there, you come. We'll
Uh-huh.
work around you. We'll do it." And so I was just like beside myself, staying up all night and writing these charts and
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
come up with everything. And we went in and we just played that stuff, man.
Uh-huh. Well,
Uh,
there's a lot of great energy that comes from a live setting or not only or like most of Chick's recordings, even the studio stuff, were first takes.
yeah,
Chick really preferred first takes. He didn't like going back and trying stuff again.
right.
He thought you lost a lot of the creativity and energy from
Uh,
the initial take. So even if the first take had some minor glitches, he would prefer that over, trying to make it perfect.
Bob James used to say that same thing too in interviews because I remember one, and I'm a huge Bob James fan all the way back to college.
Yeah, same.
Night on Bald Mountain, man. Feel like making love. And there was this, I lived with this black bass player, and he said, I'm bringing her over and I'm putting on Feel Like Making Love, Bob James. And then I would have to hear it on repeat because he would play that side. He had that side of the vinyl. I would have to listen to that and him and the girl, and that was all night. But Bob used to say he felt that way too. He was like, I go back to a lot of these albums and I know where all the mistakes are,
Uh-huh.
but most people don't.
Yeah.
So being overly not were you produced your stuff as well as writing it and all that?
Well, I have a friend who's an Emmy Award-winning producer, who produced it. But
Okay.
I planned it all out, and I worked very closely with him, so that he could help me realize my vision for the project.
Okay.
And then afterwards, I found out, it's a lot quicker and easier and cheaper to release live albums,
Right.
a lot less expensive. And so
Yeah, especially if you
I've
can
just
do
been
them
doing that
if you could do
ever
them
since.
do those at a cool gig like the 1905 place that you're playing there.
Hmm.
That's a lot better. I mean, we used to have a place in Fullerton, California, about an hour east of LA called Steamers, and they had a great setup, a good piano. And man, I would just go in there and they said they had a guy, the sound man would make you a DVD of the gig.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So at the end of the night, the club owners disappeared with a waitress somewhere, but the engineer is like sweeping the floor and he's like, I'm baking your CD right now. It'll be
Uh-huh.
ready in 20 minutes to take the CD back to the studio. I wonder
Yeah.
how we
My
sounded.
my live albums are a little one step removed from that. So when I decide to do a live recording, I'll do a multi-track recording, and then I can then have my friend Dave Mathew
Right.
and mix
Mix
it.
it. Right.
And occasionally we may or may not fix a little glitch here or there. You can hear that from me.
Well, the
Um,
multi-track option was something that it was theoretically available at the
uh-huh.
place that I was at. So it all just depend on who
Yeah.
spilled an Irish coffee into the audio interface the night before.
Right.
And some nights you were live to 2-track, and other nights you had all 16 tracks available.
Right.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Well, now, well, I've got you here. Portland is your home base. Tell everybody kind of because I played in Portland at the PDX Festival in March of 2023 with Hubert Law's group, and it was amazing to me. I saw like 20 or 25 gigs happening all on the same night that were all jazz gigs in Portland.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting festival where they partner with a bunch of different venues around town, uh,
Okay.
for a couple different weekends. And there's some midweek stuff between the two weekends as well.
Okay.
But rather than having traditional jazz festival where everybody's at this one huge stage or a couple different stages all at one place,
Uh-huh.
festival is
Spread
spread out
out.
to smaller venues. Although this next year actually, like one of the acts coming through is Erica Badu at Moda Center, the huge place where the Portland Trailblazers play basketball.
Wow.
But they're billing that as part of, she's a headliner for the Portland Jazz Festival. So hopefully that'll actually like make more people that aren't jazz fans kind of perk up and become more aware of the Portland jazz scene.
Yeah, so well, but in general, I mean, that's a specialized time, but like if somebody were to move to Portland, would they be able to find like 3 or 4 clubs to rotate around through, or is it just the 1905 and somewhere
Well,
else?
there's several clubs around town, and actually a few more in the works that are not open yet, but are in the planning and build out stages. And
Okay.
so yeah, the 1905 is definitely the top jazz club in town. They used to have live jazz 7 days a week.
Okay.
They're down to they were closed for a while and had some management changes, but they reopened again this past spring and now just doing 5 nights a week.
That's still a lot, man,
Usually 2
because
shows a
that's
night.
still a lot.
They 3 shows on a weekend per
Okay.
night. They'll do a late show as well after the 2 main shows.
Uh,
And it's a mix of the top local acts as well as national acts coming through.
okay.
I've seen Antonio Sanchez there. He brought his own band through there.
I love him, man. He's
Jazz
incredible.
Alley and up in Seattle, and they had a day in between that and their next gig down in Eugene, Oregon, I think. And
Okay.
so the club grabbed him and said, "Hey, instead of having a day off, how about you play here?" And so
Nice.
they'll do things like that where they'll try to partner with, they'll get like an artist that's going to be playing up in Seattle, and they'll spend a day before their Seattle gigs to come down to Portland and play at 1905.
Now, Portland
There's a few other
is,
clubs around town.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
Portland is known as a place where there's was this heavy kind of R&B funky thing going on way back in the day. It was this band called Pleasure.
Yep. Yeah. In
And
fact, I play with some of the guys that are.
do you know those guys, the Pleasure
Yep.
guys?
Yep. Yeah, I did during the pandemic. I was playing some R&B cover band stuff and with some of the members of the current lineup of Pleasure.
Okay. Yeah, I worked with Nate Phillips, who was a bass player back in the original days.
Uh-huh.
And then isn't Jeff Lorber, the fusion guy, isn't he from Portland?
Yep. He got started out here. So did Kenny G was playing with him early
Oh,
on.
that's right. Kenny G's from Portland.
I don't exactly know where Kenny's from, but I know he spent some of his early years
Well,
playing with
yeah.
his group.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and listen to the early Kenny G stuff with Lorber, Kenny is like an amazing tenor player.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and for those of you that follow the Planet Mullins podcast, go back and watch Vale Johnson, the bass player for Kenny G, who still has Kenny's gig since 1986 to 2024. Same bass player. Go watch that episode of me interviewing Vale Johnson, being interviewed about Kenny's fame and the inside stories of, all the road travels with Kenny and everything, because it's a pretty interesting story, and you can find it here on YouTube. You can find it at YouTube or Spotify or Apple. I mean, Vale, do you know who Vale Johnson is, the bass player?
I know of him.
Okay.
That's
Yeah. Yeah, he's, I think he was a guy that was from that area as well. He went on to do Kebmo and played with Herbie for a while.
Okay.
And has done a lot of stuff. So,
Jeff Lorber, even my rhythm section of Damian Erskine and Reinhardt Melz, they've done gigs with Jeff when Jeff's played in Portland.
Right. Well, I think Jeff has been living in LA for a really long time by now.
Mm-hmm. But sometimes, when he comes back through Portland to do shows, he'll hire often local rhythm sections if he's not bringing a rhythm section with him.
Right. Well, I know you got a bunch of tracks in the can, so tell us about maybe when the next album's going to come out, and
Okay.
maybe I think you have another gig book that's going to happen pretty soon. Is that the end of
Uh,
December this month?
yeah, the Saturday after Christmas, December 28th.
So,
Uh,
oh yeah, I have a gig that night too. Yeah,
all right, you're doing a two piano show at
yeah,
Classic.
I'm doing the two piano show.
Where it's not Classic Pianos. That was your last show.
No, but
Where,
it's Classic Piano's sponsor.
oh, I see. Okay.
And speaking of which, I was at Classic Pianos today, and their headquarters is there in Portland. I was talking with Bob that manages the Denver thing, and he said, "Yeah, man, if you want me to jump in and help Mike with anything in Portland,
Oh, wow.
then
Awesome.
you know, you just hook me up, and so I'm going to connect to you two guys, and that'll be
That'd be
great.
great.
That'll be a great thing to help you
Yeah.
because
In fact, my next live album is uh, was recorded at Classic Pianos in Portland
oh
last.
wow,
So
okay,
uh, we're taking the best parts of that show plus the best stuff from this upcoming show, um, and we'll release that stuff as the live album.
yeah,
And,
incredible, great. Yeah,
yeah.
so but you know, I had the thought too because I was thinking about earlier today when I was up there talking to Bob. And by the way, I'm missing the homemade barbecue bowling free all access event staff party for Classic Pianos in order to film this tonight.
Well, thank you for your sacrifice.
And they were like, "Man, you got to come because we're bringing the brisket." And Bob is a big time rancher guy. He's from Kansas, and
Okay.
you know, I mean, if I can't find him on the weekend, he's in Montana getting like a side of beef
Oh, wow.
and driving it. And he's an expert cook. He's a very interesting. You'll love him, man. I'll hook
Okay.
you guys up.
Cool.
But he said, "Man, you got to come tonight over to the party." And I said, "I really want to, but I've already got something on the books. I got it scheduled with this keyboard player up in Portland." They said, "Oh, Portland? Well, that's where our home office is." And I said, "I know." Because they fly this guy from Classic Pianos out there to Denver,
Okay.
and then we film videos.
Oh, wow.
But we don't make a couple videos. It's like Bobo mania, you know. So yesterday, I hadn't heard from Bob for 3 days. We had no guest artists for our concert, same night as yours, December 28th.
Uh-huh.
And he had told me earlier in the week he was sick, but I'm thinking, man, I said on my promo I have special guests, you know,
Uh-huh.
and I don't have anybody. So I wake up and there's this text from him, and he says, "Well, I've got these two Asian twin classical prodigies, and I've got to call into their parents, and then I have a cello player showing up at 2 o'clock, but there's a bass player who's going to be here at 1:30, and it's like 11,
Uh-huh.
and I'm an hour south of where he is."
Okay.
So I just like said, "Do I have a suit coat in the truck?" "Yes, I do." "Okay, where's my phone?" "All right, boom." And I got there right around the same time as all this whole cavalcade of people. Now the show is called the Rob and Bob Show, and he hadn't cleared any of this with me.
Okay.
so so I'm like, "Oh man, holy crap, what's gonna happen?" And you know what? The classical twins were in school, so they didn't make it.
Okay.
Um, and they might open for us on that Saturday, but the cello player was amazing. And it was the daughter of somebody that he knew, got a piano there. Because that's everybody in Colorado and like in 7 states, they all go through Bob. I mean, he has the best pianos. They got $4 million worth of pianos on the floor. That's
I went to high school in Denver. I finished high school in Denver.
oh, which one?
I went to it was a small private school, Denver Christian High School. Uh,
Oh, okay.
but it was it was really interesting how things came full circle from what introduced me into jazz, hearing Dave Grusin on the radio. Well, Dave
Right,
and his brother Don grew up
right.
in Littleton, Colorado. And where did I end up living when I was in high school? Littleton, Colorado.
You know what was funny? When I was in high school, I was the piano teacher at Happy Logan Music in Bear Valley,
Okay.
and Dave and Don would send their bass players to study from me when I was 16.
Oh, wow.
So they had this, so they were using me to like train their guys to get them up to speed, and I was teaching full time and going to high
Uh-huh.
school.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, I've known those guys for years. I got tons of stories, but anyway, going back to, we'll have to wrap up here pretty soon too.
Okay.
But going back to the thing with Bob, so I show up there, and there's an upright bass player, and there's a few customers in the store, and he's got all these brand new Bosendorfers sitting in there, and they fly, Classic Pianos flies Luke to Denver to make the videos, and they had just finished tuning all these pianos. Bob said, sit down over there, that Bosey, it's brand new. It's really cool, and I'm going to sit on this one. Oh, Luke, where are you at? And then Luke, who's a genius video guy, I'll hook you up with him too, because he's a great
Okay.
video and photographer, and he's a hell of a jazz guitar player too.
Oh,
So
wow.
he just shows up out of nowhere and says, "Are we ready to roll?" Yes, we are. Boom. So Bob and I start playing this thing, and the bass player jumps in, and then the cello gal shows up, and she's kind of hesitant. She's just in the back watching, and I could tell she's pretty young because the way that she came into the showroom was to stand 30 feet away and film us.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
she didn't introduce herself.
Uh-huh.
We come in just like, oh, I
Uh-huh.
see it. There's a millennial because she's not going to check. She's just going to film things and not say anything to anyone. so, so anyway, I goes, cut, stop. Hey, you back there with the camera. What are you doing here? She goes, oh, I'm the cello player. Okay, get in here. So she came in there, and man, we worked up just amazing guest artist stuff with these two players in about an hour's time. I
Nice.
mean, incredible. She's got her master's from Eastman. Emily Cole is her name, and then the bass player Wilson Bob had worked with him before. But when it comes to dealing with Bob Baker, he's always got so many simultaneous
Uh-huh.
things going on at once that the only way you can be sure it's all going to happen is you have to go down there.
Okay.
And I'm
Yeah.
not always in Denver. Like, next month I'm going to be in Atlanta, and in March I'm on tour all over the West Coast. So I'm glad I was able to get down there. And then he said, oh, I thought I told you about all these people. And I said, well, a text message doesn't, an hour before they all get there doesn't really give me a lot of prep time.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'll turn Bob on to your music, and I know he'll dig it because I don't know how many pianos he sold Dave. I don't know how many pianos he sold
Huh.
Bob. I don't know how many pianos he sold me.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the Aspen Music Festival, they lease 11 Steinways from him every summer.
Yeah. Wow.
11, right? And so,
Yeah,
and
I'm sure he'll recognize a lot of Dave and Don Grusin influence in my writing, along with
oh
Chick.
yeah, yeah. Well, he's super cool. So remind me, I'll hook you up with him.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else to say to the young people out there that want to learn about the secrets of your success? What's a good thing to tell them? Like, don't call your. I just always say, don't call your band Wind and Silver, because that's a horrible band name.
I would
What would you
say,
say?
just try to figure out whatever you need to do to make your dreams come true. And just set yourself little milestones along the way and
Okay.
work toward it. You'll be amazed at what you can actually pull off.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. We got Mike in Portland, who's been sharing his incredible story about his music tonight and interacting with Chick Corea, and his new album's coming out, and he's playing gigs, and he's got. If you ever wanted to play songs that go 1, 2, 3.5, 4, 2, 5, 7, 8, he's your guy.
I write
Yeah.
stuff in 4 too, so
Yeah, you got 4 on the floor as well. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on, man, and happy holidays and best of luck
thanks
with
so much,
everything.
Rob.
All right, folks, and that's going to do it. See you next time.